Good to see you, and thanks for joining us. I'm Felicity Ezewike. So the current leader of Burkina Faso has captured the imagination of many Africans with his bold moves and leadership style. He is young, the youngest head of state in Africa when he took office in 2022. But he is not a Democrat. The preferred governance of the books. He came to power by force in a coup. So why is Captain Ibrahim Traoré suddenly everywhere, capturing imagination, so to speak? Well, supporters say he's shaking things up with his take on African identity, independence, and what it means to lead. They see him as a hero and admire his bold moves to reduce French influence, promote local industries, and assert Burkina Faso's sovereignty. On the other hand, others view him as a cautionary tale, pointing to concerns about authoritarianism, human rights abuses, and the militarization of politics. They worry that his leadership style could undermine democratic gains, erode civil liberties, and create instability in the region. One Slot today takes a shot at unpacking the complexities of Traoré's leadership and the implications for Burkina Faso, the region, and the continent. Our guests in London is African Affairs Analyst Thamsanqua Zhou, and in Washington is a research fellow at the Africa Center for Strategic Studies, National Defense University, Daniel Eizenga, Ph.D. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us and giving us the gift of your time.
Thank you for having us.
Thamsanqua, I will start with you and just go ahead and ask if you could help provide us some context on Burkina Faso's history and the factors that had contributed to Traoré's rise to power in the manner that he came in.
Yeah, well, first of all, greetings to your viewers, and thank you for having me. You are wearing a pair of glasses which looks very intellectual, and I feel sometimes inadequate that, it is the look that comes with the intellectual capacity, the optics of analyzing such an important topic that is also current. My view is very simple. A lot of people are right in describing what's going on as the second slot, the second attempt at what Africa should be. Remember, there were so many attempts that were made after the first wave of the colonial system collapsing across Africa in the 60s. There were so many leaders that tried to come and do exactly this. That continued probably to the 80s with Thomas Sankara's generation. There were many leaders in that generation who were trying to fight what they defined as neo-colonialism. And what you are seeing now in West Africa is something that has been done elsewhere in a different way. Probably if you look at what happened in Zimbabwe, when the people of Zimbabwe decided around 2000 that they were going to take back the land and lead an African-centric revolution, if you like. There was no taking over of power in the way that we have seen in West Africa. In Tanzania, we saw that with the late President Magufuli. The approach that he took, he basically said the minute that he was in power, although he was still a member of the party that had been ruling from the days of Nyerere and others, he basically said it is time that the Tanzanians were to take control of the means of production in their own country. And the way he treated, especially foreign companies and others that were coming from outside, that he believed were, under declaring in the mining sector, under developing the areas, and also overpricing most of the work and the tenders that they had. So what most people say is what Magufuli has been doing and what the people of Zimbabwe did and what the likes of Thomas Sankara were doing is exactly what he is trying to do now together with his colleague. And of course, you just have also to listen, Felicity, to the current president of Ghana. He has come in through an election, but the language that President Mahama is using now is basically saying, let's go back to the times of Kwame Nkrumah and let's go back to the times of the old leaders and say, what does Africa need to do to be out of poverty, to be an area that is known for processing and value addition rather than just a source of raw materials for the other parts of the world. Felicity?
Yeah, I don't know. Do we have Daniel? Just to confirm. Okay. I can't hear Daniel, but I'm going to just stay with you, Thamsanqua, until they can tell me that we actually have Daniel on. And just, the preferred rule is democracy. That is not what is obtained in Burkina Faso. Yet, he's getting these accolades. How do you marry that with our understanding of what good governance should be about? And should we really be celebrating?
Felicity, you are African. So democracy preferred by whom? And what kind of democracy?
I mean, we've all been schooled, Thamsanqua, we've all been schooled that democracy is government for the people, by the people, and for the people. And in order for you to get to rule the people, you have to be elected. That's what we know. Yes, there are conversations about what should constitute our democracy. But for now, all the regional bodies, all the leaders, all the scholars say that democracy is the way to go. So are we trying to move the needle by changing the conversation and redefining what democracy is? Is that what you are leading to?
Right. So take a country like Nigeria. Of course, it's a country where different kingdoms were brought together, but those kingdoms were great. You talk about the Benin Kingdom. Any kingdom that I can pick in Nigeria was a great kingdom. There was economic success. There was social success. There was, the level of governance at that time was beyond reach. Now, in comes colonial systems. Then they define what they want African people to copy as a model of governance. But Africa has been like that for centuries and centuries. So you will find that in Africa, or let's take the Middle East, for instance, or let's take maybe some statistics, shall we? If I were to ask you, Felicity, and say that in the last 30 years, count and look at the countries that have managed to take at least 50% of their populations out of poverty. Those countries will be mostly in the Middle East, where that level of democracy or that type of democracy you are describing doesn't exist. But there's economic success. Those people are richer. The average person in Kuwait today is richer than an average Nigerian. The average person in Saudi Arabia or United Arab Emirates today is richer than an average person in Cameroon or Benin or Chad. These countries have got what you call democracy, but the levels of economic deprivation, the inequalities that you see, the outcomes, the actual human factor outcomes are low. Look at China.
Okay, let me interject there. Let me interject there, because my point, my role here is to play the devil's advocate to some degree, so our viewers can get the most out of this conversation. And on that premise, I'm going to talk about, you've emphasized the economic difference and growth in some of these places, but what about the human rights, the stifling of people's freedom of expression? Some of these issues have always come up where we have these kinds of leadership. Yes, there might be some economic gains, but is that enough for us to look at it in a more positive light and perhaps, because that seems to be where it's going, encourage more leaders to be like Traoré and the likes?
That is what you call neo-colonial myth, Felicity. It doesn't exist in that form. If you go to United Arab Emirates, if you go to Dubai today, you might find that the people there will tell you that they are freer, they are happier, they have better outcomes, they are richer than people in a country in Africa that has got all those tick box issues of democracy, if you like. Human rights issues, you know, they are what they are. The freedom of expression, it is what it is. Even if you go to the United States of America, or you go to Britain or Greece, you know, these countries that say they are the foundation of democracy, you are not necessarily free to say what you want. You are not going to have everyone happy with the people that they have in leadership. So all I am saying to you is what President Traoré and others are saying is that it is time that Africa defines its own democracy, its own governance systems, its own way of doing things. But more importantly, nationalism, take control of your own mining sectors, for your own oil, of your, you know, just like what Nigeria is doing with Dangote and others. When you begin to say you have refineries in Nigeria, the outcomes for that are better than a time where, you know, all these barrels of oil are just being shipped out to another part of the world, and then Nigeria gets back processed, you know, fuel, paraffin, and other things. So it is always better to be in control. Look at what the Middle East have done. They've taken control of their oil and gas, and the outcomes are better for them, democracy or not democracy. Look at what China has done. It has internalized the process of production. They have developed, they have taken out, you know, probably close to 500 million people out of poverty in the last 2 or 3 decades. So for Africa to advance beyond, you know, you want to come to Lagos. If you were to go to Mars for some years and come back, you want to come back to a Lagos that is different from what you see now. It doesn't matter what the model is, as long as the people of Nigeria can say they are now responsible and in charge of their own minerals. They are now responsible of their own oil. They are now developing everything themselves. There's no African country that needs to be going out and looking for anything called foreign direct investment. And in a way, I would say what President Traoré is trying to do has been done in Nigeria, but in a different way, mostly by individuals who went to the diaspora and came back to Nigeria and did amazing things, especially in the financial sector or the banking sector. You know, all those institutions are domestic but doing very well. All right. And they can compete against the best in the world. And that is exactly what you want. You want Africa to have the capacity to be food secure, to develop on its own, and to process almost everything that comes from the ground. The issue of just the same from pit to pot is bad for the economy, bad for people, and everything. Yes.
You do have a point. Nationalizing local wealth has been one of his moves that has been celebrated. I think there's a lot of talk about creating a state mining cooperation, which the people had long clamored for. All of these are good things. I mean, the argument sustains. But let's just stay with what's happening in Burkina Faso. On the one hand, Traoré says he wants to remove all traces of colonial connection by doing away with France. He started with the military, asking them to leave, that they will find a way for themselves. But on the flip side of that coin, he's creating a relationship with Russia. We understand currently there is conversation about, you know, security in terms of security and helping them fight insurgency. The country isn't doing so great in trying to combat terrorism and all the challenges that they've had over the years. Isn't it trading one for another if you're saying you're looking to be self-sufficient and then you're creating a new relationship with another superpower who has a history of doing things that sometimes are not mentionable? Is it a win-win if you look at it from that prism?
Felicity, you brought up a number of things there. Let me start with the nationalization aspect you raised. The nationalization that these leaders are talking about is a stopgap. Is kind of a halfway house. It's not where the direction of travel should be.
I need to interrupt you. I just needed to think on that. When we come back, you will take your response. But for now, we need to interrupt this program and go live to Washington, where we understand that President Trump is receiving the Canadian Prime Minister. We will come back after that. Stay with us. Let's come back to where we were before we had to interrupt. We had to interrupt for that live broadcast from Washington. One slot is the program. We're looking at Africa's rising star. In many regards, he's been celebrated, even though he's not a democratically elected leader. I'm talking about Burkina Faso's Traoré. Ibrahim Traoré. One writer, Chinedu Okafor, on the Business Insider describes him as Africa's most loved and unapologetic leader. Well, my guests are still with me. We had one before we went on the break. I'm talking... Thamsanqua Zhou is still with me. We're expecting another guest. We're hoping he can join in before the program is over. Thamsanqua, thank you so much for being patient with us while we took that break to go find out what's happening in Washington. So before we went on that break, we were looking at the seeming contradiction here. On the one hand, Traoré is saying he wants to erase all trace of Western colonization, and he is cutting ties with France. On the other hand, he's creating a new relationship with Russia, and we hear that while he has sent away the security from France to fight the insurgency in his country, he is negotiating new deals with Russia to do exactly the same thing. So I'm wondering, this celebration we're talking about, is it a trading one for the other? What prism will you be looking at it from?
Well, Felicity, I don't know why you call it an interruption from, when you cut away to President Donald Trump in Washington, because what President Trump has done in the course of the one slot is give you that slot answered all your three questions in actual fact. So all I'm going to do is walk the journey that he has. President Trump did say there when I was talking, with Mark Carney, the new Prime Minister of Canada, that I remember from Oxford, and when he was the governor of the Bank of England, I know Prime Minister Mark Carney very well. What President Trump said is his approach is America first. Why? Because he believes, or at least is bringing up the narrative that, America has been ripped off by the rest of the world for a very long time. 50 years, he actually said it. And then he's talking about the American interest and defining the industries where capacity has to be brought in locally, where investment has to be brought in locally, where conditions created within the United States are such that America will benefit. Companies will, have no choice if they want to trade or do business in America, but to go there. So in a way, if we come back to Ouagadougou and to answer your questions, that is exactly what President Traoré and others are trying to do and say. They are also saying Africa has been ripped off for the last 50 plus years because everyone was coming to Africa and taking whatever they wanted and underpaying. So if you talk of a country like Niger, for instance, the uranium was undervalued in terms of what the value was going to be on the world market. So the people of Niger remained poor, but the countries that were benefiting from the uranium from Niger were getting richer and having energy security. The same with gold, the same with oil, the same with a lot of things, cocoa, if you go to Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire and other places, agriculture when you go to other parts of the world. So in a way, the when you look at China and you look at other countries, especially Saudi Arabia and others, the government will, or maybe the state will be in control of certain companies that are strategic to the national security, but they allow those companies to go out. So that's why you see that the Americans and others will say, well, they don't want TikTok or they don't want something else because they think all this, or Huawei, because they think these companies are linked to the state. So in a way, Africa and what President Traoré is trying to say is, if they say the state is involved in the construction of roads, you want to make sure that there's transparency, the state is not being cheated, the taxpayer has value for money in the project, and you can evaluate them, you can monitor them, you can stop people that are trying to rip you off in a way. You can own the mines, but make sure that all the money is going to the benefit of the local citizens as opposed to foreigners. You can own the means of production so that you remain in control, because if you are not in control, you're vulnerable. And
so is that what is happening currently?
But when it comes to this,
I mean, everything you've said does. I was trying to interject to push a point. Is that what is happening with the interaction between Burkina Faso and Russia?
Yes. So you heard President Trump there talk about the security of Canada, probably the security of Europe within NATO. The Americans are protecting those countries. Why? Because they have interest there as well. So when Burkina Faso and other countries, President Traoré and others say they're talking to Russia for security interest, they are not necessarily saying they are not talking to the Americans or talking to the French even. They are talking to others, but only want terms that are advantageous to them and their interests as the people sitting in Ouagadougou or Bamako or any other, or Conakry or any other part of the world. So in actual fact, when they say they are going to talk to the Russians, there are things from a security point of view where there is an advantage for them to interact and engage the Russians. But there are also other things that probably because of what's been happening within the region, maybe Nigeria has a specific aviation interest. And
all right,
maybe
Thamsanqua, I hate to do this, but we need to...
They are not saying it's exclusive, but they are saying this is the way to go. That gives an advantage. It's not either or. They don't want to be told what to do.
All right, Thamsanqua, we'll come back to you and you complete your thoughts. We just need to take a short break. We'll be right back. Thank you for being here and sticking with us through. We have less than 5 minutes to wrap up. Thamsanqua, I don't know if you just want to conclude your thoughts before I move on to the next question to wrap things up.
No, yeah, it's okay. But all I was saying is that, you know, what these West African leaders are doing in saying they are reaching out to Russia, to China, to America, to Europe, they are not wanting to be put in one box. Neither do they want to be defined as wrong when they engage one side or the other. You know, their friends don't necessarily have to be friends of the other that also want to help them. They want to be able to have a relationship that minimizes the risk. But I appreciate what a lot of scholars and those that are analyzing, some of the journalistic colleagues who are saying from a security point of view, when, especially in this global environment, when you are engaging Moscow or other parts of the world, that increases their own risk as leaders, which then means they need to tighten their security around them. But by and large, there's nothing wrong in doing that.
I mean, I wish we had more time. The interruption of that broadcast did break our train of thought. But just to wrap things up, there's a lot of, we have to acknowledge that there is a lot of love for Traoré in many parts of Africa. Even African democratically elected leaders are speaking up. But can his style of leadership be seen as a model for other African countries, or are there unique factors that at play in Burkina Faso that might not work if replicated? I know you seem to have some sympathy with what's going on there, but is this something that should be duplicated? What might be the implications?
Well, I'm told actually most of the people that support him and tweet about him and everything, social media-wise, are women, which is very interesting. But in terms of the leadership style, I think the leadership style is not unique. It is what Africa has always had, what Africa has departed away from within the context of democracy. Even within a democracy, what we saw in Tanzania with Magufuli, what we are seeing probably with the second term by President Mahama in Ghana, what we are seeing even in Nigeria, some people, when you have strong leaders who have a direction and they want to do things. And I just want to say in that, in terms of the leadership style that you mentioned, President Boko in Botswana come in through a democratic process. He's seen as a star of democracy. But his comments when he was when he was asked about Burkina Faso and other countries in the leadership style, he did say something that was interesting and also brought in President Kagame of Rwanda in the process. He said that in a democracy that is a westernized type of democracy, it's difficult even to build a road. But if you are having power and authority, you can get things done.
I know. We have to wrap things up. I wish we had more time. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and insights on this conversation. I know I was asking some really tricky questions, but thank you for giving us some insight.
It's all good, Felicity. People should watch One Slot. It's a good program. We can argue and make it last.
Thank you.